When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Please be seated.
My dear brothers and sisters, the ability to identify what is important is essential to our life. Mahalaga sa ating buhay na marunong tayong kumilatis. Ano ba ang tunay na mahalaga? I remember that one of my favorite topics in literature when I was still a student, especially in high school, at alam ko po na marami sa aking mga teachers ang nanonood at nakikisa sa ating pagdiriwang ngayon. One of my favorite lessons was the lesson on identifying the main topic of a paragraph of a literature. Yung hahanapin mo, nasan ba ang topic sentence ng paragraph na ito? Because to be able to identify the topic sentence is to identify the most important idea in that particular paragraph or in that particular literature. And even in doing things, the wise suggestion is that when we have many things at hand, we have to identify what is important and start with them. Kapag marami daw tayong gagawin at hindi natin alam kung ano ang ating uunahin, hanapin natin ano ba yung mahalaga sa mga dapat kong gawin at doon tayo magsimula. The ability to identify what is truly important. My dear brothers and sisters, our readings today teach us the same lesson, identifying what is important. In our gospel today, a scholar of the law asked Jesus, "Teacher, which commandment of the law is the greatest? Which commandment is the most important?" There are 613 laws that a faithful Jew should observe. Napakaraming batas na dapat nilang alamin at sundin. That is why the question of the scholar of the law, of the expert of the law, is a valid question. Of these many laws, sa dinami-dami ng mga batas na ito, ano ba ang pinakamahalaga? And to his question, Jesus immediately answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself." The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. The answer of Jesus shows his ability to look at the many provisions of the law and identify the most important. Si Jesus may mga mata na kaya niyang tumingin sa maraming bagay at makikita niya sa maraming bagay na ito ano ba ang tunay na mahalaga. Jesus has eyes that are able to differentiate between what is important, what is essential, and what are merely incidentals. Kayang tingnan ni Jesus ano ba ang mahalaga at ano naman yung mga hindi masyadong mahalaga. My dear brothers and sisters, this is one important lesson that we have to learn in our life. The ability to identify what is truly important. Sometimes, we confuse what is important with what is urgent. Madalas, nalilito tayo sa pagitan ng ano ba yung importante at ano ba yung urgent. But my dear brothers and sisters, urgency does not always make something important. Hindi dahil kailangan gawin agad, hindi dahil urgent ang isang bagay, importante na agad. Important matters are not always urgent. And we have to differentiate between the two. Is this urgent but not important? And is this not important but urgent? Our readings today also teach us that we have to focus on more important matters than on trivial things. Madalas kasi ang ating pagtingin, ang ating focus ay nandoon sa mga hindi naman talaga mahalaga. At doon sa mga hindi mahalaga, doon nauubos ang ating oras, doon tayo napapagod, doon nauubos ang ating atensyon, to the neglect of the more necessary ones. We miss the forest because of the trees. We focus so much on simple little things that we miss the big things, the more important things in life. My dear brothers and sisters, today Jesus teaches us that loving necessitates the ability to identify what is important or who is important to us. Makapagmamahal lamang tayo ng tunay kung alam natin ano ba o sino ba ang tunay na mahalaga. Loving God with all our heart, with all our mind, and with all our soul is only possible if we accept that God is most important in our life. Dahil kung hindi natin kikilalanin ng Diyos bilang pinakamahalaga sa ating buhay, hindi rin natin siya mamahalin kung paano natin siyang dapat mahalin. Buong buo, lahat ibibigay para sa pagmamahal sa Diyos. Kung kikilalanin natin ng Diyos bilang pinakamahalaga sa ating buhay, magiging madali na para sa atin na mahalin ang Diyos ng lahat-lahat at ng buong buo sa atin. Pero kung hindi naman mahalaga ang Diyos sa ating buhay, siguro mamahalin pa rin naman natin siya, pero nang tira-tira na lang. Tira-tirang panahon, tira-tirang oras, pag available ako, pag may panahon pa ako, o kapag kaya ko pa. In our second reading today, St. Paul praises the Thessalonians because of their faith in God. From being pagans, they became believers of Jesus. And St. Paul says, that they turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God. Nananampalataya na sila sa Diyos, sa tunay at buhay na Diyos, at tinalikdan na nila ang pagsamba sa mga Diyos-Diyosan. At nagawa lamang ito ng mga taga-Tesalonika dahil nakita nila ang halaga ng Diyos, ng kalooban ng Diyos, ang halaga ni Jesus sa kanilang buhay. My dear brothers and sisters, is God important in our life? Mahalaga ba ang Diyos sa ating buhay? Siya ba ang pinakamahalaga na dapat nating mahalin ng higit sa lahat? Loving our neighbors as we love ourselves is also possible only if we acknowledge the importance of our neighbors as we give importance to ourselves. Hindi na tanong kung pinapahalagahan pa natin ang ating sarili. Kasi parang natural naman yun na mahalaga ang tingin natin sa ating sarili. Pero ang tanong, kung mahalaga ang tingin mo sa iyong sarili, yung bang pagpapahalaga mo sa iyong sarili, ganun din ang tingin mo sa iyong kapwa. At kung mahal mo ang iyong sarili, ganun din ba ang pagmamahal mo sa iyong kapwa? Because we can only love others as we love ourselves if we also see the importance of other people to us. If we look at ourselves as more important than others, mas mahalaga ako kaysa sa iyo, hindi natin sila mamamahal. If we look at things of this world, money, possessions, wealth, power, prestige, popularity, if we look at these things as more important than others, then we will value the things of this world more than people. Mas papahalagahan pa natin ang mga bagay-bagay sa mundong ito kaysa sa ating kapwa-tao. In our first reading today, God lays down to the Israelites how they should deal with others, especially those who are not of their equal, yung hindi nila kapantay, like widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor. Paano daw dapat pahalagahan ang mga taong ito? And at the very heart of the law that we heard in our first reading today, God is telling the people of Israel, people are more important than the interest that you will get. People are more important than the cloak that they will give as a pledge. Mas mahalaga ang tao kaysa sa tubo. Mas mahalaga ang tao kaysa dun sa isinangla nila. Kaya kung yung isinangla nilang balabal, yun na lamang ang kanilang natitirang balabal, sabi ng Diyos sa mga Israelita, ibalik mo yun bago magdilim. Kasi baka wala siyang gamiting balabal sa gabi. What God is saying is this, that we have to value people more than anything else of this world. Because when we value people, we will be able to love them. Baka kasi mas pinapahalagahan pa natin ang mga bagay sa mundong ito. Baka mas pinapahalagahan natin ang ating sarili kaysa sa ating kapwa. Kung ganun ang mangyayari, hindi natin sila tunay na mabibigyan ng nararapat na pagmamahal. My dear brothers and sisters, you know, if there is one thing that this pandemic teaches us, it is also this same lesson to identify what is truly important. Sa panahon ngayon, nakikita natin ano ba yung tunay na mahalaga sa ating buhay. Yung mga akala natin dati mahalaga, pwede naman palang wala. Pwede naman palang hindi masyadong pumupunta sa mall at mag-shopping. Pwede naman palang magkakasama tayo sa bahay palagi. Maraming mga akala natin dati mahalaga, ngayon nakita natin hindi pala mahalaga. At namulat ang ating mga mata sa mga tunay na halaga ng buhay, ng pamilya, ng pananampalataya sa Diyos, ng kalusugan, ng buhay na ipinagkaloob sa atin ng Diyos. Noon pong kasagsagan ng quarantine, ay may mangilan-ngilan na itinuloy ang kanilang kasal dito sa Manila Cathedral. Kahit na 5 tao lang ang naririto, ay itinuloy pa rin yung kasal. At sabi nila, alam mo Father, pinangarap namin ng isang magarbo at magandang kasal. Kaya nga pinili namin ng Manila Cathedral. Mahaba ang lalakaran, punong-puno ng tao, maraming magdiriwang. Pero narito kami ngayon, yung ikinakasal, isang ninong, isang ninang, at ako na magkakasal. Sabi nila, na-realize namin na ito lang pala talaga ang kailangan at matutuloy ang aming kasal. Kahit pala wala yung ibang mga bagay, basta narito kami at narito ang Diyos, matutuloy ang kasal. Yun ang mahalaga. My dear brothers and sisters, let us ask that grace from God in this Mass today. The ability, the grace to identify what is truly important in our life. Ano ba ang tunay na mahalaga sa iyo? What is important? Your work, your business, or your family? What is more important? Your pride or your relationships? What is more important? Prestige, honor, power, authority, or your faith? Ano ba ang mas mahalaga? Ang mga bagay sa mundong ito, ang kayamanan sa mundong ito, o ang iyong kaluluwa? Ano ba ang mas mahalaga? Yung buhay sa mundong ito o yung buhay sa piling ng Diyos sa langit? My dear brothers and sisters, let us ask God's grace so that we may be able to have the eyes that see what is important in our life. May we have a heart like Jesus so that we may love like Him. May we have a heart like Jesus so that we may love God above all else and we may love one another as we love ourselves.
Please stand.